Bună ziua, bun găsit la Impact Internațional, sunt Cristi Gava, o ediție cu totul și cu totul specială astăzi, alături de un invitat special, generalul Ben Hodges, una din figurile proeminente ale armatei americane, fost comandant al armatei americane în Europa. Mr. General, thank you very much for being with us today in Bucharest.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Mr. General, we all know how important it is for Ukraine to win this war. What is, in your opinion, the state on the Ukrainian front at this moment and the current situation of the two armies?
So, of course, there's a lot of tough fighting still to go. The Russians do not care how many of their own soldiers are killed. They'll keep pushing them into the conflict. But when I look at all of the different factors, I see Ukraine has the initiative. Russia's Navy is beginning to have to withdraw from Sevastopol because of what Ukraine has achieved there with just a few Storm Shadow precision weapons. The Russian Air Force has not been able to destroy not one single train or convoy bringing ammunition or equipment from Poland into Ukraine. After 9 years of war, Russia still controls less than 19% of Ukraine. So what is needed now is a commitment from the United States, Germany, and other Western European allies to say it's our policy that Ukraine wins. We want Ukraine to win, not just survive. And all of this talk about, Ukraine should give up Crimea for the sake of peace is really, really unhelpful. It's naive, and it's oxygen to the Kremlin. So
To prepare a new offensive.
What it does, it tells the Kremlin that they just need to hang on a little bit longer because the West doesn't have the stomach for this. We've been distracted by Israel, and so I think if Ukraine had the capabilities from the beginning that they needed, this war would have already been over.
What can we expect in the coming months?
So for sure, the Ukrainians are not going to stop just because the weather is changing. I was watching video this morning of Ukrainian forces crossing the Dnipro to the left bank, to the east side of the Dnipro River, and they're building up capabilities there. And I think they are going to keep pressure on Russian forces using every means possible. They are not going to give Russia the chance to improve defenses or bring in new things. I keep hearing people talk about a new Russian offensive. Well, we saw what happened the last big attack at Avdiivka. They've lost
In Donbass, yes.
thousands of people, hundreds of vehicles. And so I don't believe that off in the forest somewhere or on the other side of the Urals is a whole nother corps that's trained and ready to join the fight. I think as I look at the Russian perspective, I see no reason for optimism. There's no bright light. As long as the West continues to support Ukraine, I see no good options for Russia.
The war has come to a situation similar to the Western Front in the World War I, told some strategists. A protracted war. How dangerous is what we call the Western fatigue? And we are talking about Western fatigue and the exhaustion of Western military forces and resources regarding the war in Ukraine.
Yeah, this is a classic disinformation effort by the Kremlin to feed the narrative that the West is tired, this Ukraine fatigue. How can anybody in the West be tired? Not one single person other than our diplomats at the embassy should be tired.
It's Russian propaganda.
Of course it is, because that feeds this narrative of people who are defeatists, who maybe don't want to see Ukraine successful or don't care. And so this is an excuse, but not one American soldier, not one Romanian soldier, not one British soldier, not one German soldier has been killed or even wounded or broken a fingernail in Ukraine. And by the way, even though the U.S. and the EU have committed a lot of money and resources, actually what's been delivered is not that much. and it's not that much in terms of what we could be doing. The U.S. has increased artillery production, but we finally provided 31 Abrams tanks. That's one battalion. We have about 4,000 Abrams tanks in America that are sitting in a parking lot. So the West has not seriously committed to helping Ukraine. We have not provided the ATACMS rocket, the one with 300 kilometers, not the cluster, but the 300-kilometer range that could hit Sevastopol, Saki, Jankoy today. We haven't done that. The Germans stopped short of providing Taurus. So I don't want to hear about fatigue. The only thing that's tired is the political will of people who don't understand why it is so important that Ukraine defeats Russia.
You spoke about the vital importance of liberation of Crimea. What kind of strategy would be necessary from a military point of view, and what would it mean for the Russian Federation?
So 3 things have to happen to liberate Crimea.
And Sevastopol.
And Crimea, first of all, recognition that Crimea is the decisive part of this war. The Russians don't care about Luhansk and Donetsk, except for the land bridge that connects Rostov to Crimea. That's the only reason they care. They have not done one thing in 9 years.
Mariupol, Zaporozhye, Kherson.
The Russians have not done one thing to improve life for anybody in the Donbass, other than to take them in and force them into the military. So they don't care about that area, only the ability to connect Crimea back to the Russian mainland. The way the Ukrainians will liberate Crimea is to first isolate it. So Kerch Bridge, for sure, Kerch Bridge is going to disappear again. Okay, it's going to be hit hard when the Ukrainians are ready. And then the other of the two ways to get to Crimea, the other is the land bridge that we just talked about. That's what the ground part of this counteroffensive is aiming to do, is to break the land bridge. So you have isolation, and then you have to make Crimea untenable. Make it so that the Black Sea Fleet cannot stay in Sevastopol, that the Russian Air Force cannot operate from Saki or the other bases, and that the big logistics base at Jankoy should be destroyed. To do that, they need long-range precision weapons that can hit those targets. I mean, there's no place to hide in Crimea. There's no mystery where the bases are. The Ukrainians just need the ability to hit it. Now, they've already proven the concept by what they did over the last 5 or 6 weeks with special forces destroying radar on the west side of Crimea, and then using British Storm Shadow, were able to destroy the dry dock of the Black Sea Fleet in Sevastopol. And by the way, they destroyed a submarine and a logistics ship that were in the dry dock. This is brilliant targeting, because when you destroy the dry dock, the Black Sea Fleet cannot do the maintenance it has to do. So they can't stay there. They have to reposition to Novorossiysk or some other port that has necessary maintenance facility. And then they hit the headquarters and destroyed the headquarters, killed or wounded, who knows, maybe around 30 staff officers. The admiral, if he was killed, it doesn't matter. The admiral, easy to replace. Replacing 30 staff officers, that is a real problem. And so that's why the Black Sea Fleet is beginning to reposition. That took 3 Storm Shadows, that's it. Imagine if the U.S. provided 50 or 100 ATACMS, 300-kilometer range, then they could hit every airfield, every logistics base in Crimea, and the Russians would have to reposition. And then the third thing, of course, is eventually Ukrainian forces will have to go in and occupy Crimea. But the key is to make the Russians leave it. The Ukrainians know that they will never be safe or secure as long as Russia occupies Crimea. And maybe more importantly, they will never be able to rebuild their economy if Russia occupies Crimea, because the Russians block access to Azov Sea, which means that Mariupol and Berdansk can never rebuild even after they're liberated. And Kherson and Mykolaiv and Odessa are always going to be within range of disruption. So people will not invest money in the rebuilding of Ukraine as long as Russia occupies Crimea.
There are more and more attacks coming from Moscow toward the Republic of Moldova and the liberal pro-European regime in Chisinau. What could be a possible solution for the liberation of Transnistria? Is there any possibility, any chance of escalating regarding the conflict in Moldova?
I don't see a serious possibility for Russia to expand the conflict from Transnistria. I mean, as long as Ukraine is able to be successful, and as long as that's the main thing. It will be very difficult I think, for Russia to generate something. I think actually, probably most people in Transnistria are not interested in becoming a part of some sort of escalation. I don't know what positive outcome that they could possibly achieve by doing that. I think, you know, we have a very good ambassador in Moldova.
Yes.
And, you know, I've listened to him, and I think that the government of Moldova, as long as it continues to work like it's trying to deliver good governance, and with some patience, and with Ukraine winning against Russia, I think the conditions for a positive outcome with regards to Transnistria and Moldova, I think that's the best path.
What is your opinion regarding the Russian malign bad influence in Europe?
Well, look,
we have Viktor Orban government in Hungary, and now we have a pro-Russian government in Slovakia, Robert Fico government, who stopped supporting Ukraine.
So there's no doubt that the Russians are doing what they can to undermine support and cohesion across Europe for Ukraine, but also not just for Ukraine, but for the idea of liberal democracy, where young people, their talent can be fully realized. People get to make their own choices instead of a fascist-type government that controls the media, that has unfair judicial practices. I take heart from what happened in Poland. In Poland, young people came out to vote. They got tired of the oppressive, ultra-conservative government
Law and justice
that was there before. And so that shows me that you can, in fact, defeat the malign influence. And, you know, I see evidence occasionally that Hungarians also are becoming a little bit tired of this. I mean, they're paying a price. They're going to miss out on the benefits of EU membership, and Slovakia will begin to feel some of that as well. On the other hand, you know, this is why in our democracies, voting is so important, and people being educated and informing themselves. And so we just have to do a better job in the West of telling our own story and giving people reason to be confident in their government. The reason people are vulnerable to Russian malign influence is because they don't trust their own government, they don't trust their institutions.
It's not good government. Yes.
Yeah, and so they look for some other. That's how it is in the U.S. People are vulnerable to the disinformation because they don't trust what's there. So that the burden is on our governments and our leaders to regain the confidence of people in their elections process, in their courts, in their media, and in their leaders.
We are dealing with a war of tyranny against the free world. How do you see the political situation in Russia now, the situation of Russian army and the situation of the military groups on the front? What is the regime's authority over them?
I think that the Kremlin, Putin, is very, very much in charge. The very public assassination or execution of Mr. Prigozhin, I think, sent a very clear signal to everybody that loyalty is more important than competence. And so at this point, I don't see a real challenge from any of the oligarchs or anybody around Putin. Otherwise, there's no way Shoigu and Gerasimov would still be in their jobs after 10 years of terrible performance, but they are extremely loyal. And so I think what's left of Wagner is being absorbed into the Ministry of Defense, which is what Prigozhin was trying to prevent.
Yes.
You know, his whole mutiny was a business move. It was not about overthrowing the government. That was pure business to prevent Wagner from being absorbed into the ministry. Russia still uses various private military companies to do things in Syria, for example, and in Africa. They generate a lot of wealth for people in the Kremlin. And their instruments, like we know that, for example, Wagner is handing over Panzer air defense systems to Hezbollah.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, so this kind of thing goes on, but these are not acting autonomously, I don't believe. I think he is completely in control. And he's able to do this, of course, as you and probably most of your viewers know. Almost all the casualties that the Russians are suffering come from outside of Moscow and outside of St. Petersburg. There's not many sons of the elites
Yes.
From St. Petersburg or Moscow that are sitting in Ukraine right now.
Mr. General, I would like to know your opinion about this new war that has just begun in Middle East. How is the war in Israel affecting the global order right now?
So what it really looks to me is that this is the end of the peace dividend. You know, the end of the Cold War, we called it the peace dividend, that now we don't have to spend so much money on defense anymore, and we're all going to get along, we're going to be interconnected economically, and people can come and go.
Global.
Everything's going to be great. Well, obviously that was a fairy tale. That was what we wanted. I believed it was possible, but it wasn't. And now we're paying the price for not being prepared militarily to demonstrate that we are going to defend what we care about. And so Russia and their close friend, the Iranians, I think, are working closely together. This is not a coincidence that Hamas attacked Israel a month ago.
At this moment.
Right, because Russia desperately needed relief. They needed the distraction and the divergence of support from Ukraine to Israel. Russia needed that. So Russia actually is the biggest beneficiary. The second biggest beneficiary, of course, is Iran. Iran, by using Hamas to launch this attack, the way that the attack was carried out was so brutal that this was not just normal terrorism where you blow up a bus or an airplane or fly it into a building. This was a very, very specific, savage attacks on women, how they were raped,
Children.
people that were killed, heads cut off. I mean, it was done in such a brutal way, intended to provoke a response that they were pretty sure the Israelis would do, especially Netanyahu, that they would be completely over the top because they would be so angry and enraged at the horrible way Hamas killed these innocent people. And it provoked a response that Hamas wanted. And so, of course, the Israelis now are in Gaza City with the mission to destroy Hamas. And they've killed over 10,000 by some estimates. I never trust numbers that come from inside Gaza, but there's no doubt thousands of innocent people have died as a result. And so this was an intended outcome. Hamas doesn't care about these Palestinian people. Iran for sure doesn't care about the Palestinian people. But what they have accomplished by doing this, and notice that Hezbollah has stayed out of the fight.
Yes.
Okay? Because Hezbollah would get crushed right now. Israel is so strong, they got everybody mobilized. And so Hezbollah would lose a lot of people and stuff, and for no gain. So they don't need to get involved. And of course, Hamas is a tool for the Iranians right now. And so I think what you're seeing is a situation that has slowed down the hoped-for progress of the Abraham Accord, because Iran for sure does not want to see Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries working closely. with Israel.
Mr. General, Putin said these words about against the liberal world order. How will the world and Europe look after these words? And they're hoping that democracy will win, for sure.
So I absolutely believe that the West will eventually get organized. This requires consistent, strong, positive leadership from the U.S., but not only the U.S. We have other allies in Europe that need to recognize that we are at a point in time where if we get organized and we reinvigorate our defense industries and do what we all committed to do and focus on helping Ukraine win, we will be able to send a message to Iran and also to China that we are prepared. We are going to defend what needs to be defended. But this is not just about the Army and the Navy. This is about society. Our societies need to recognize what's going on, to not be misled by the constant disinformation about what's happening. And finally, our leaders have to talk to us as if we are adults.
Yes.
Don't try to spin me or use blah blah. Tell me, we have danger, we have real threats, we're going to have to pay to address these threats, but if we don't, the price is going to be much more. Tell me that, and I think most people will understand that.
Mr. General, thank you very much for being with us today. One last question. What is your opinion on the importance of Romania as a supporter of Ukraine and as a staunch ally of the United States in this region?
So there is no other country in Europe that is more reliable as an ally than Romania. And I don't mean just an ally to the United States, but as a member of NATO. NATO is full of good countries. Nobody does more than does Romania. And of course, when you look at the map, Romania is such an important place on that map. And that's why it is the center of gravity for the U.S. presence in the region, from our Army that's there and the Air Force that operates from there, what NATO does with Black Sea Air Policing, the French are there with the battle group. So the geography, but also what you do, what Romanians do, is an important part of helping to prevent a conflict from happening here.
Thank you very much for being with us today. Am avut o ediție cu totul și cu totul specială. Alături de noi, Ben Hodges, generalul Ben Hodges, sunt Cristi Gava. Rămâneți alături de Prima News și de Impact Internațional. La revedere!